Captain Alara Cade stood on the observation deck of the Crimson Dawn, gazing out into the black void of space. Her sharp eyes took in the stars, the shimmering points of light that reminded her how small humanity seemed in the grand scheme of the galaxy. But the truth was, humanity was anything but small. Earth had long been underestimated by the galactic powers, dismissed as an insignificant, primitive species. Yet, here she was, captain of one of the most feared warships in the galaxy, a human whose reputation had spread like wildfire across alien empires. Her journey to this point had not been easy. Earth's military might have always been outclassed by the advanced technologies of the galactic empires, their ships and weapons far beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed of. But it wasn't their technology that made Alara dangerous, it was her mind. Earth's people had a unique gift for adaptability, for learning from mistakes and growing stronger in the process. And Alara had learned everything she could from their enemies, using their own tactics and strategies against them. A sudden beep from her console broke her reverie. The intelligence reports from her scouts were in. She reviewed them with a calm precision, her fingers gliding over the controls as she digested the data. One report caught her attention, an encrypted message from an old ally. The Zorath Dominion, the most powerful and ruthless empire in the galaxy, had placed a bounty on her head. They were sending a team of assassins, the legendary Night Stalkers, to eliminate her. It was a challenge she had anticipated, though she would have preferred more time to prepare. The Zorath, known for their precision and tactical brilliance, had never failed in their missions. Their elite assassins had a reputation for being merciless, lethal, and efficient. Alara had made a number of powerful enemies in the Dominion, but this was something new. She wasn't simply being targeted because of her success in disrupting their operations. She was being hunted for the threat she represented, a human who had the audacity to stand up against the greatest empire the galaxy had ever seen. Alara leaned back in her chair and studied the map of the sector. The assassins would arrive soon, but she was ready. She had been preparing for this moment for months. She knew the Zorath better than they knew themselves, their predictable patterns, their reliance on their advanced technology, and their rigid strategies. It was the same arrogance that had led to their downfall time and time again. They thought they could control the galaxy, impose order on its chaos, but they hadn't reckoned with humanity's ability to adapt, to think in ways their logic could never comprehend. Her mind began to race as she thought through the possibilities. The Zorath would send their best operatives, probably in the form of a stealth team capable of infiltrating her ship undetected. They would disable her defenses, neutralize her crew, and eliminate her swiftly. But there was one thing they didn't understand about humans: humans didn't play by the rules. They didn't follow the scripts their enemies expected. That's what made them so dangerous. The Night Stalkers would soon learn that no amount of technological superiority could predict the actions of a human mind. As Alara considered her options, a message from her first officer, Lieutenant Darian Hale, appeared on her screen. "Captain, I've just received an alert. We're picking up unusual energy readings from a nearby sector. Could be a stealth ship." Alara's pulse quickened. She already knew what that meant. The assassins were on their way. "Activate all countermeasures. Seal the outer holes and prepare for boarders," she ordered. "This isn't going to be a simple attack. We're dealing with the Zorath's best." Hale acknowledged the command, and within moments, the ship's defenses sprang into action. The crew worked with military precision, activating shields, scanning for any hidden intruders, and securing critical systems. Alara's fingers hovered over the console as she activated the emergency lockdowns, ensuring that the assassins would be locked inside the ship's lower decks if they attempted to breach. She glanced at the data feeds once more, reviewing the trajectory of the incoming vessel. It was cloaked, as expected, but her sensors were more than capable of detecting the distortions in the surrounding space. The Zorath might have the technology to hide their ship from most scanners, but not from a human mind that had studied their every move. Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity. The tension in the air was palpable, and Alara could feel it in the pit of her stomach. She had fought in many battles before, faced countless alien threats, but this was different. This wasn't just about outgunning an enemy. This was about survival. The Zorith Dominion had made a grave mistake in underestimating her, and now they were going to learn just how dangerous a human could be. "Captain, we've detected a cloaked ship attempting to dock," Lieutenant Hale said, his voice tight with urgency. Illyra's eyes narrowed. "Seal off the docking bays and prepare the crew for a possible boarding. I want every inch of this ship monitored. Do not let them get close." Her orders were followed without hesitation. The crew knew that this was no ordinary mission. The Zorith had already made their move, but Illyra was prepared. She'd studied the Dominion's methods, and she knew exactly what they would try. The key to defeating them wasn't brute force, it was strategy. She would turn their own tactics against them, exploit their overconfidence, and use their rigid thinking to her advantage. The seconds ticked by, each one like a countdown to an inevitable confrontation. Illyra remained calm, though she knew the stakes. This wasn't just about her. If the Zorith succeeded, it would send a message to the rest of the galaxy that humanity could be eliminated, wiped from existence without consequence. But she wouldn't let that happen. Not while she was still breathing. Suddenly, the alarms on the ship blared, signaling a breach in the outer hull. Illyra stood up, her expression hardening. The assassins had arrived. She quickly accessed the ship's internal security feeds. Her eyes scanned the corridors, looking for any sign of movement. There. She saw one of the Night Stalkers slip into an air vent, his movements precise, calculated. He thought he was hidden, but Illyra had anticipated this. She had already disabled the air vent system, locking him in a trap. One down, but there would be more. Another figure moved silently through the lower decks, and Illyra smiled. She knew exactly where he would go. A small team of her most trusted crew members had already been dispatched to the location, prepared to deal with the threat. They would be ready for the moment the assassin arrived. As the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the assassins began to realize that something was wrong. They were used to operating in the shadows, relying on their technology to give them the upper hand. But on this ship, technology was only part of the equation. The human mind was an unpredictable force, one they hadn't accounted for. Illyra's mind was racing as she thought of her next move. She couldn't afford to make any mistakes. This was her chance to turn the tables on the Zorith Dominion, to show them that humanity was not a species to be dismissed so easily. It was time for the Zorith to learn that they had underestimated her, and that was the last mistake they would ever make. The game was on. And in this game, she wasn't just the target. She was the hunter. The assassins, cloaked in their advanced stealth gear, had infiltrated the Crimson Dawn without a sound. Their training was flawless, silent, deadly, and precise. They moved through the ship's corridors like shadows, blending into the dark recesses of the ship, their every footfall calculated to avoid detection. To them, this mission was simple. The Zorith Dominion had never failed, and neither would they. Their objective was clear: eliminate Captain Illyra Cade. She had become a thorn in the side of the Dominion, disrupting their fleets and undermining their authority. Her tactical brilliance had proven a constant headache, and now the Dominion had chosen to deal with her once and for all. The Night Stalkers were the perfect tool for this job, elite assassins known for their stealth and ruthless efficiency. They were trained to neutralize threats before they even knew they were in danger. But as they moved deeper into the ship, something began to feel off. The air was thick with an unsettling quietness. The ship's crew had locked down the inner holes, but the assassins expected that. They were used to dealing with ship-wide lockdowns. Yet, there was something in the environment that felt too calm. No ship was this quiet, especially one as heavily guarded as the Crimson Dawn. Vree, the leader of the Night Stalkers, paused, signaling for his team to halt. His instincts, honed over years of training, told him that something was wrong. He motioned to his second-in-command, a quiet and calculating figure named Zether. "Check the air vents. Something's off." Zether moved toward the ventilation shaft, crouching low to inspect it. The vent was sealed, which was unusual. Zorith assassins knew to exploit the air systems to move unseen. The sealed vent was a trap, but they hadn't anticipated it. With a soft hiss, a net of electromagnetic fields snapped into place, trapping the nearest assassin in an invisible, unbreakable web. The assassin, named Karath, tried to struggle, but the more he moved, the tighter the net pulled. His advanced cloaking technology flickered, a sign that it was being overwhelmed by the ship's magnetic field. "Damn it!" Karath hissed, his voice muffled as he attempted to escape. Vria's heart rate quickened. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Crimson Dawn wasn't supposed to have these kinds of countermeasures. He turned to Zether. "Get him out of there. Now." But Zether's eyes widened in realization. "Captain Cade knew we were coming." Vria's thoughts raced. Of course, she knew. The human was always several steps ahead. The Crimson Dawn wasn't just a ship, it was a fortress, and Cade wasn't an ordinary captain. She was a human who had studied every move the Dominion had ever made. She had anticipated them before they even knew they were a threat. "Forget him," Vri growled, his voice cold. "We move forward. We have a job to do." The team proceeded, but the ease with which they had entered the ship had now evaporated. The further they went, the more they could feel the change. Every corridor felt like a trap, every dark corner a potential death. The assassins had spent years learning to become shadows, yet on this ship, they felt exposed. Every step was weighed down by the pressure of being hunted, not the hunters. They entered the main hallway where Cade was last reported to be. As they approached the command deck, Vria's mind raced through the possibilities. Cade was a strategist, she wasn't going to be caught off guard. She knew what they were capable of. This entire mission felt like it had been designed to lure them in, like prey leading a predator into a trap. "Prepare for anything," Vri muttered. His voice betrayed his growing unease. The assassins moved quickly but carefully, checking every corner, every shadow. They were closing in on their target when something changed. The ship's lights flickered, then shut off entirely, casting them into darkness. The entire corridor seemed to collapse in on them, a suffocating blackness that drowned out even the faintest noise. Zether cursed under his breath, activating his helmet's infrared sensors. "I can't see anything. Power's been cut." Vria's senses sharpened. "It's not just the power. This is deliberate. Cade knows where we are." He didn't need to say more. The trap had sprung. They had walked right into it. Suddenly, the air shifted. A whisper of movement, too quick to track, but unmistakable. Then, without warning, a blinding light erupted from the shadows, disorienting the assassins. A burst of electromagnetic energy, stronger than anything they had encountered, surged through the air, short-circuiting their cloaking devices and scrambling their communication systems. "Get down!" Vri shouted, but it was too late. A dozen small projectiles shot through the air, piercing the shadows and striking their targets. One assassin fell to the ground with a hiss of pain, another was hit in the shoulder, a third was blasted backward into the wall. The precision of the strike was uncanny. They had underestimated her again. Zether tried to recover his bearings, but as he moved, a figure emerged from the dark, moving with a speed and grace that left him momentarily stunned. It was Cade, her eyes cold, her movements fluid, almost predatory. "You're too late," Cade said, her voice low and calm. "I knew you were coming." Vria's mind raced. He had to adapt, had to think. He couldn't let her get the upper hand again. "You think you can stop us? We'll tear you apart, Cade." But she didn't respond with words. Instead, she moved again, faster than he expected, using the environment to her advantage. She dropped a small device at her feet, a smoke grenade filled with an aerosolized compound that disrupted the assassins' enhanced senses, clouding their infrared vision and scrambling their HUDs. Vri and his team tried to regroup, but it was no use. The human was playing them, drawing them into her web. As the smoke cleared, they saw her standing at the center of the corridor, waiting. "You underestimate me," Cade said, almost conversationally. "But then again, that's what you always do." Vria's mind was racing. They had been caught in a trap, outsmarted at every turn. They had assumed that their technology and training would be enough to deal with a human, but they hadn't accounted for her adaptability. Kate wasn't playing by the same rules. She was using every advantage she had, every inch of the ship, every flaw in their plan, against them. "We'll fight you to the end," Zether said, gritting his teeth as he drew his weapon. Cade's smile was cold. "You don't understand. It's not about strength. It's about survival. And you're not going to survive this." The fight was on. The assassins, trained to be silent and deadly, found themselves at a disadvantage against Cade's sheer unpredictability. Every move they made was countered with a strategy they couldn't fathom. As one by one, they fell, Cade's mind moving faster than theirs, her tactics 1,000 times more fluid. The last assassin, Zether, managed to land a blow, but by then, it was too late. Cade had already anticipated his every move, every feint. With a sharp twist, she disarmed him and held him at gunpoint. "I gave you a chance," Cade said softly, her weapon aimed directly at his chest. "But you didn't listen." Zether's chest heaved as he realized what had just happened. The human had turned the tables on them, completely. And there was nothing they could do about it. "You're not going to get away with this," Zether muttered, his eyes filled with disbelief. Cade didn't answer. Instead, she simply pulled the trigger. The blast echoed down the corridor. The silence that followed was deafening. The final assassin, Zether, collapsed to the floor with a soft thud, his life extinguished in a single, precise shot. Elara Cade stood over him, her pulse steady, her breath even, as she surveyed the wreckage of the elite Night Stalker team. Her fingers still gripped the handle of her weapon, but the fight had already ended. It was over. Yet, as she gazed down at the fallen assassins, something inside her stirred, a reminder of what this moment truly meant. She had won, but it wasn't just about survival. It was about sending a message to the galaxy, a message that would reverberate through the darkest corners of the universe. Humanity was no longer the insignificant species that others could trample on. They were a force to be reckoned with. Elara turned, her boots clicking softly against the steel floor as she made her way back toward the bridge. The mission wasn't complete yet. There was still work to be done. The Zorith Dominion had made a grave mistake by underestimating humanity, and they would soon realize that their empire was built on fragile foundations. As she entered the command center of the Crimson Dawn, her first officer, Lieutenant Darian Hale, met her gaze. His face was a mix of relief and admiration. "Captain, they're all dead," she finished for him. "The Zorith thought they could end me with a few assassins. They were wrong." Hale nodded grimly, his eyes scanning the control panels. "The rest of the Dominion fleet is still in the sector. They'll want answers. They won't take kindly to this." "Good," Elara replied, her voice firm. "I'll give them the answers they deserve." She approached the main console, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface, pulling up the tactical map of the sector. The Zorith Dominion was large, its fleet powerful, but it was also predictable. That was where their strength became their weakness. Their arrogance blinded them to the one thing they hadn't accounted for, the human will to survive. Elara's plan had been simple. The Crimson Dawn was equipped with the latest in human adaptive technology, systems designed not just to fight but to outthink, to adapt, to evolve in the heat of battle. Every move she made in the battle had been calculated, every countermeasure preempted. She had made sure her crew was ready, but she knew it was her mind, the one thing the Zorith couldn't replicate, that had turned the tide. "We're going to need to move quickly," Hale said, his voice tense. "If they're sending assassins, they're probably preparing for a full-scale retaliation. We need to make our move before they can regroup." Elara's eyes narrowed. "I know. Prepare the ship. We're not running from this fight. We're going to show the Zorith what happens when they underestimate humanity." She turned her attention back to the tactical map, her mind working through the possibilities. The Zorith Dominion had an overwhelming military presence, but they were also conservative. They would hesitate before sending everything they had into a full-scale engagement. The assassins they sent were their best and most elite warriors, which meant they likely viewed the Crimson Dawn as a more formidable threat than they let on. Elara would use that hesitation to her advantage. She would draw them in and make them play by her rules. As the crew worked in unison to prepare the ship for battle, Elara took a moment to reflect. The Zorath had always considered humanity beneath them, primitive, undeveloped, incapable of standing against the advanced empires of the galaxy. They thought they could wipe them out with a few high-tech assassins and a couple of ships. But humanity's true strength wasn't in its technology or its numbers. It was in its ingenuity, its ability to adapt and learn from every challenge. And that was something the Zorath had failed to understand. Elara smiled to herself, the thought of the upcoming battle filling her with a quiet sense of purpose. It wasn't just about proving humanity's strength. It was about making a statement that the galaxy would never forget. The Zorath had made their move, but Elara Cade wasn't going to let them control her fate. She would turn the tables, make them regret ever thinking they could target a human captain. The Crimson Dawn began its approach to the enemy fleet. The ships of the Zorath Dominion hung in space like a swarm of deadly insects, their advanced weaponry bristling with power. Their arrogance was palpable, but Elara knew that they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that their technology would always give them the upper hand. They had believed that they could outthink humanity, but they had misjudged the nature of the human spirit. The ship's engines hummed as the Crimson Dawn slid into position. Elara stood at the bridge, her fingers hovering over the command interface as the final preparations were made. Her crew was ready. They knew what was at stake. The Zorath would not be allowed to dictate the terms of this conflict. "All systems are online," Captain Hale reported, his voice steady but with a hint of excitement. "We're ready when you are." Elara nodded. "Let's show them what happens when you push humanity too far." With a single command, the Crimson Dawn powered up its weapons systems. A surge of energy pulsed through the ship, charging the weapons that had been designed specifically to counter the advanced technologies of the Galactic empires. The Zorath had underestimated the power of human ingenuity. They had built their empire on brute strength, on overwhelming force, but they had never anticipated the kind of ingenuity that could turn their own tactics against them. The first shot came from the Crimson Dawn's forward cannon, a burst of plasma energy that tore through the empty space between the ships. The Zorath fleet retaliated almost instantly, but their response was slow, predictable. Elara had already calculated their movements, already anticipated their counterattack. Her ship's shields absorbed the incoming fire with ease, while the Crimson Dawn returned fire with precision, disabling one of the enemy ships in a matter of seconds. Elara's heart raced, but her mind remained calm. This was what she had been preparing for. She had studied the Zorath, learned their weaknesses, and now she was using every ounce of that knowledge to her advantage. The Zorath thought they could destroy her with a few assassins, but they hadn't considered the one thing that could never be planned for, the unpredictability of a human mind in battle. "Captain," Hale said, his voice sharp. "They're retreating. They're pulling back from the engagement." Elara's eyes narrowed. "No, they're not retreating. They're regrouping. They'll come back with reinforcements." She wasn't wrong. A few moments later, the rest of the Zorath fleet reappeared, their ships emerging from the shadows like a swarm of locusts, hungry for vengeance. But Elara wasn't afraid. The Crimson Dawn had already proven its superiority in combat. And now, it was time to finish what she had started. The battle raged on, but it was clear who held the upper hand. The Zorath, once so confident in their technological superiority, were now playing catch-up. The Crimson Dawn was faster, more adaptable, and more lethal than they had anticipated. The tide of the battle was turning, and the Zorath were beginning to realize the extent of their mistake. Elara stood firm at the helm, her mind sharp and focused. This was the moment she had waited for. The galaxy would know that humanity was no longer the prey. Humanity was the hunter. And the Zorath Dominion would never forget the lesson she had taught them. The battle stretched into hours, the stars around the Crimson Dawn flickering like distant beacons amidst the chaos of war. The Zorath fleet, once poised and confident, was now disorganized and retreating, their commanders scrambling to respond to the devastating human resistance they hadn't expected. Elara Cade stood at the heart of the storm, her focus unwavering. Every move she made was deliberate, calculated. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore, she was fighting to prove a point that the galaxy would remember for eons. "Captain, they're down to half their fleet," Lieutenant Hale reported, his voice laced with a mix of exhaustion and awe. "They're pulling back, but I'm not sure how long they'll be able to hold out." Elara nodded. She could feel the shift in the air, the Zoratha's confidence crumbling beneath the weight of their failure. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. The Crimson Dawn was a ship built for warfare, but it was more than that. It was a symbol, a living testament to the ingenuity and resolve of humanity. The Zorath had sent their best to take her down, but they hadn't counted on one simple fact: humans were unpredictable. They adapted. They learned. And they never gave up. "We need to finish this," Elara said, her voice steady as she scanned the battlefield. "Prepare the final assault. I want to hit them with everything we have." Hale's eyes gleamed with determination as he relayed the order to the crew. The tactical map on the bridge flickered, showing the remaining Zorath ships, wounded but still dangerous, hanging on by the thinnest thread. They were retreating to the outskirts of the system, hoping to regroup and call for reinforcements. But Elara wasn't about to give them that luxury. She had been one step ahead of them from the beginning, and now was the time to strike the final blow. "Captain," Hale said, his voice low but urgent. "We've got incoming, another wave of reinforcements from the Zorath. They're trying to make a last stand." Elara didn't flinch. "Let them come. We'll make sure they regret ever thinking they could take us down." As the second wave of Zorath ships entered the battlefield, the Crimson Dawn accelerated toward them with deadly purpose. The crew, battle-hardened and focused, moved in a synchronized rhythm. The ship's advanced targeting systems locked onto the incoming threat, and within moments, the Crimson Dawn unleashed its weapons with pinpoint accuracy. Plasma cannons, ion torpedoes, and energy pulses blazed from the ship, cutting through the vacuum of space like lightning. The Zorath ships retaliated, but their responses were sluggish and disorganized. Elara had seen their patterns, understood their tactics, and now she was using that knowledge to tear them apart. The Crimson Dawn danced around the enemy fire, moving with an agility that the Zorath couldn't match. Their ships were larger, more heavily armored, but they were slow. Predictable. Within minutes, another Zorath cruiser exploded in a fiery burst, debris scattering in all directions. The Crimson Dawn's shields flickered but held strong as the enemy fire rained down, their weapons unable to breach the human ship's defenses. The feeling of power was intoxicating, but Elara kept her focus. She knew that this victory wasn't just about defeating the Zorath, it was about sending a message to the galaxy. The message had already spread: humans were not to be underestimated. And as the battle wore on, Elara realized something else. This wasn't just a battle for survival or pride. This was a turning point, a moment where humanity could redefine its place in the galaxy. "Captain, another Zorath ship coming into range," Hale warned, his voice tightening with the pressure of the ongoing assault. "It's their flagship. They're pulling out all the stops now." Elara's eyes narrowed. She had been expecting this. The Zorath would send their flagship, the Ruthless Dawn, to take down the Crimson Dawn. It was their last remaining hope, their final play. The Ruthless Dawn was a formidable vessel, its weaponry powerful enough to rival any human ship, but Elara had already outwitted them once. She wasn't about to let them win now. "Lock onto their engines," she ordered. "We take out their power, and their fleet will fall apart." The Crimson Dawn's weapon systems hummed as they adjusted to target the flagship's power core. The ship lurched slightly as the first volley of plasma torpedoes launched. They sped toward the Ruthless Dawn, hitting their mark with brutal precision. The first hit was a direct strike to the flagship's engine core, causing a violent cascade of explosions that rocked the ship. For a moment, it seemed like the Ruthless Dawn would stay afloat, but then the second volley of torpedoes hit, one after another, tearing through the already damaged hull. The flagship's shields collapsed, and the ship began to fragment, unable to hold its position any longer. "Direct hit," Hale reported, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "The flagship is going down." Alara's face remained impassive. She didn't need to celebrate the victory. It was only a small part of the larger plan. With the ruthless Dawn crippled and its command structure in disarray, the remaining Zorith fleet had lost its backbone. They were scattered, leaderless, and vulnerable. The Crimson Dawn's weapons fired again, cutting down ship after ship, each one falling apart in a fiery burst of light. It was over. But then, just as the final enemy vessel was struck down, Alara felt it, a disturbance in the ship's systems. An alarm blared across the bridge, and the screens flickered erratically. Her fingers flew across the controls as she tried to assess the situation, but the ship was still intact. The damage wasn't coming from the outside, it was internal. "Report," Alara barked. "We're receiving a transmission," Hale said, his voice sharp. "It's coming from the Zorith fleet, an emergency message." Alara's eyes narrowed. The battle had been won, but this felt like something more. She hadn't expected them to surrender, not after everything that had just transpired. The Zorith were too proud to ask for mercy. "Put it on screen," she ordered. The holographic screen flickered to life, and for the first time, Alara saw a Zorith face, an alien figure, tall and imposing, with a sleek, angular helmet covering most of its features. Its voice was cold, mechanical. "This is High Commander Varthos of the Zorith Dominion," the voice said, its tone laced with barely contained fury. "You have made a grave mistake, human. You may have won this battle, but you have signed your death warrant. The Dominion will not forget this humiliation. You will pay for what you have done." Alara's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "I don't think so. You've already underestimated humanity once. I wouldn't count on making the same mistake again." The Zorith commander's expression tightened, his fingers twitching as if ready to issue a command. But before he could speak again, Alara's voice cut through the tension. "You had your chance," she said. "The galaxy isn't yours to control. You've just learned the hard way that humanity isn't your enemy. We are your reckoning." With that, she cut the transmission, and the hologram flickered out. The bridge fell into a heavy silence. The crew was silent, knowing that what had just occurred would be remembered for years to come. The Zorith Dominion would return, of that, Alara was certain. But they would never again look at humanity with the same disdain. They would know that they had awakened a force that could not be extinguished. Alara turned to face her crew, a determined glint in her eyes. "We've won today," she said, her voice steady but filled with purpose. "But this is only the beginning. The galaxy has yet to see what humanity is truly capable of." And with that, the Crimson Dawn sailed into the stars, leaving behind a legacy that would echo through the cosmos. The Zorith Dominion would never forget the name of Alara Cade, nor the human fleet that had turned the tide of history. The universe was about to learn that humanity was not just a force to be reckoned with, it was a force that could change the course of the stars themselves.